Initiative, Dr. Nairi Berry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Culpepper for hosting this event with us. Can I take this off? And then I want to thank our executive board, senior executive board, Trustee Henderson, Vice President 1, Chancellor Rodriguez, our student trustee, Kenneth Calhoun, then our Chancellor's Justice Fellow, Dr. Regina Smith. And this event really couldn't have taken place unless I had the help of the entire committee and the entire Southwest College community. But I really want to give a shout out. I don't know if she's around. She's probably hopping around. Professor Yvette Tucker. You know, oftentimes we get caught up with our daily schedules, and as educators, we're just always walking around giving out the labor of love. And sometimes we forget, we don't take a minute to pause to think about how far we've come. What type of examples are we leading? And one of my favorite quotes by one of my new favorite people, Justice Ketanji Jackson. During her confirmation, she said, you know, it really takes a village to raise a judge. So think about that. If it takes a village to raise a judge, it takes a village to help our students be successful, to help our community excel, do better than just survive. We have to ensure that our community thrive. And so what that means is oftentimes we're gonna face challenges. We're gonna face challenges, but I want you all to keep in mind that our ancestors experienced more challenges than we can ever fathom, And I want you to look around and tell your neighbor, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. No, I want you to say it like you mean it. One more time. And with that being said, we have to let that penetrate. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means for me. During late summer, early fall, we took a delegation of 40 administrators, faculty members, classified, and I want to say that journey was transforming. It was transformational. When we walked through that walls of nowhere to return, and then we came back to what we call our new home, this new home that we were enslaved and basically built this entire country on our backs for free labor. And too often, the studies, the test scores, everything says we are behind. We are behind in everything that they designed for us to be behind in, right? But today, we're gonna have a presentation that says, no, we're not behind. What we will not do is transform to what they want us to be. Our ancestors fought against that. And too often we forget. Too often we incorporate the institutional values that require us to go against one another, not trust one another. And I'm here today on this sovereign land, on this land that ancestors decided in this community. You can have community colleges all across the county, but in this community, during that time, it was predominantly African American. And they said, not on our back, you're not going to have a community college in my community. And they decided, with their ancestors guiding them, that we're going to put a community college in this community. And we always have to keep that in mind. We have to keep that in mind. If they did it, we can do it. So with all that being said, I would like to introduce another one of my two other of my favorite people, Chancellor Rodriguez and Trustee Henderson. I want to say throughout this time that I've been in this role, I don't know if she's here yet, but I've always had the support, and not too often when I come up with my wild ideas, and I'll tell you, even colleagues go up against my wild ideas, right? And I want to say, this particular leader, he said, you know, Dr. Berry, I stand with you. I stand with you, right? He pulls my coat collar sometimes, right? But he said, I stand with you on this decision. If that's what the committee wants, we're going to move that forward. And I just want to say, it's good to have allies. It's good to have allies. Oftentimes, we don't have allies. We're searching for allies. But allies allow for the soul to feel better. It allows for the soul, the labor of love, to feel and know that you're not doing work in vain. So I want to turn it over to one of my favorite chancellors, Chancellor Rodriguez, and my superstar, Trustee Henderson.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. First, it's my pleasure to be here at LA Southwest College. I know we're kicking off Black History Month here throughout the district, but Black history is American history. And perhaps this month, because it's so important that around the country, around colleges and universities, there are many programs such as these that we're having today that uplift, that shed light on the plight, the aspirations, the goals, and the tremendous contributions of Black Americans and African Americans in this country. So I'm very, very pleased to extend a welcome on behalf of all the college presidents, all the district administration, and now I'd like to extend this opportunity to our Vice President of the Board, Trustee Henderson. Then I'll have a concluding comment. Trustee?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. My name is Nichelle Henderson. I am the first Vice President of the Los Angeles Community College District Board. I am the 6th Black woman to serve on this board. 6th. We have either been appointed or elected by the voters of LA County. So I am incredibly proud to hold this spot. However, Black History Month is February 1st through the 28th. But we Black folks, we celebrate Black history January 1st through December 31st. So we appreciate this lovely, this wonderful time that we get special recognition during the month of February. But Black history is 24/7, 365. So I am so excited to be here. Every opportunity I have to come to Southwest. I grew up in this community. I literally grew up in this community. Down the street, 126, 1658. My dad is sitting in his den right now. Every opportunity I have to come to this college, every opportunity I have to just be around my folks, I truly, truly appreciate it. And thank you all for coming out on a weekday and to come together and celebrate in community, because this is so important for us. This is so important for the students of not only LACCD, but specifically the students in this community that are not attending college when there is a college in their community. It is our responsibility to go out and get them, not wait for them to express an interest. So I hope as we celebrate this particular month, that we remember the other 11 months that we need to be focusing on our pride and our culture and bringing each other together. So thank you all.
Thank you, Vice President Henderson. So as we conclude here, simply wanted to extend again a welcome to all of you. Welcome to Dr. Akua. I had an opportunity to visit with him earlier this afternoon, and a good partner at one of the tremendous HBCUs in Atlanta. So it's a wonderful time to be here. I wanted to end by saying we're going to continue to make investments in the recruitment, retention, persistence, and graduation of Black students in this country and in this particular district. Hold us to account for that particular promise. We will deliver on that particular promise. And I'm happy to extend or share the news that our Black student recruitment for this year is up in the double digits. Isn't that good news? With a lot of support at LA Southwest and around our particular district, we will continue to make investments in Black studies so that our students can learn about themselves, learn about the history, culture, and all the different ways that the students can extend their Blackness, and we'll be unapologetic about that. So to the students, let me simply say, and we'll conclude together, that Black is beautiful, and let your Black brilliance shine. Thank you very much.
So with that being said, I have the ultimate honor and pleasure of introducing our student trustee, Kenneth Allen Callahan. This guy right here is everything. He is truly the business. I have enjoyed working with him, and he really is a student leader. And we want to make sure that he has an opportunity to be seen by you and have his voice heard. So please clap it up for student trustee Kenneth Allen Callahan.
Thank you, Trustee Henderson. Oh, y'all, how are y'all doing? Good? You doing good? That's good. Welcome to Black History Month. I'll say hello to the people online. You know, we have the mainstream watching. You know, just like Trustee Henderson said, you know, Black History Month is really Black History Year every year for Black people in general. So, you know, this is our time to shine in the main public, but every day, you know, you live through that Black experience. And I kind of wanted to take this time to touch on a resolution that was passed by our board this at the beginning of Black History Month on February 1st that kind of reaffirms the history of Los Angeles Southwest College. As many of you guys know, this it's community college, but it was built off of the vision of community organizers who saw that there was a need for education in the community. And since the 1940s, they had this vision of putting it together. They enacted this plan back in 1947, and then within 1950, they actually got the funding and had the land purchased for the college to actually be built. But it took 17 years for that college to be built, and the only reason it was actually built was a reaction to the Waltz Rebellion. So the community had to wait for something that was entitled to them for over a decade prior. So, and because of that little caveat, despite the fact that the college was built for a predominantly Black community to serve Black students, it was never recognized as an HBCU. So we have went through the process of trying to reaffirm the history of the college and making it so that it is recognized as an HBCU as it should be, and reaffirming its place in history. So this Black History Month, we're not just looking at Black history, we're rewriting it. And beyond rewriting Black history, we're also refocusing and really engaging and reinvesting in the college, because I guess I'll just give an example beyond just what's been happening, because a Black student enrollment is up, but there are still a lot of challenges that we face. And to exemplify this, I'll use an example that I had last fall. My aunt, she has never been to really public school in general. She was homeschooled since she was in middle school, and ever since she's never been to college. She went through the whole process of, she has a daughter now, she has a family that she needs to take care of. And last fall, she decided she wanted to try her hand at community college here at LA Southwest College. And it was a very challenging experience for her because she hadn't had that experience in higher education. She was trying to navigate her way through getting financial aid and figuring out how to get college resources. But because the college was heavily understaffed and she had basically no guidance, she mostly relied on me to help her navigate through the college. And it was just a whole mess because obviously I'm a student and I have responsibilities I had to take care of, and it was just a whole back and forth process. And the unfortunate thing is that this isn't a happy story, because at the end of the semester, she ended up failing most of her classes, and now she's left in a state where she doesn't want to go back to college because she's not confident in her abilities to succeed as a student. And that's mostly because she failed in getting the resources she needed, because the college didn't have the resources readily available to provide her. And this is an example of just how, and the resolution itself, it's not just an example of us just rewriting the history because we want to look back at the history. We really want to reinvest in the community and give it the resources that it needs. When I say we're rewriting the history, we're reimagining the vision of the college, reimagining how we really support the community, giving them the things that they need, that they have been asking for the longest time. And that has been, they've been asking for over 50 years. And this month, this Black History Month, I think it's about time we give it to them. So again, thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Trustee Henderson, and the Board of Trustees in general. And thank you to all the community organizers and advocates who have been fighting for resources and to make the community as best as it can possibly be. Like, you guys are the heroes. Thank you. All right, I'm passing it back over to the MC.
Before we get started, before I introduce Dr. Culpepper, I really want to introduce someone that's just very important and new in her role, Dr. Regina Smith. I don't know if you want to say a few words, Dr. Smith. She's our new Chancellor's Racial Equity Justice Fellow. You know, in this community and throughout our communities, we do a lot of social justice work, racial equity. Racial equity is key to moving those test scores away, right? Up. For racial justice, racial equity is key for our students to be successful. Underneath racial equity, we have racial capitalism. And racial capitalism, every day as African Americans, we experience racial capitalism. And what is racial capitalism? That means we are not paid the same or equivalent to our other counterparts with the same experience. Y'all don't hear me though, right? We are not paid the same, we are not offered the same opportunities as our other counterparts, including those in other spaces of color. And it's up to us to call it out. So I'm happy to say we have our Chancellor's Racial Justice and Equity Social Fellow. Here you are, Dr. Smith.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? Good. Well, thank you. This is a pleasant surprise. But I just wanted to say that I was born and raised in this community. I attended Washington High School, Henry Clay Junior High School, and we walked back and forth playing around at Southwest College, taking courses, just living our best life, trying to be best and do best. And I always tell everyone that Ice Cube actually grew up directly across the street from me. And so I'm sincerely just a few blocks away. So I know this community, I know what the needs are in this community. And so I'm honored to have been selected as Chancellor Rodriguez Social Justice and Equity Fellow. You know, my being born and raised in this community, in a community that has always been underserved, my family always taught me, be the change you want to see. And so when I was at LACD College, I don't know if you know, but I was the first Black female vice president at LACD College. Yes, I was. And there were some things that I saw that I needed to change. One of them was they didn't have a Yamoja program. Really? We don't have a Yamoja program to support our students? So I wanted to be the change I wanted to see. So I created one, and I hired staff to support it so we could have a Yamoja program. I noticed that they didn't have a first-year experience program. So I thought, we don't have a first-year experience program for all of our students? So I created it. I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. And I realized that they didn't have a multicultural diversity program for all of our students, all cultures, all diverse genders. So I created it. I wanted to be the change that I wanted us to see. So I say that to say that we all are responsible for creating the path that we want to take. It's not one individual, it's everyone. So I'm looking forward to partnering with all of you so we can continue to advance the great work that Chancellor Rodriguez has already started in advancing equity, social justice, and gender diversity, so we all can be the change we want to see. So thank you.
And now I would like to introduce Dr. Anthony Culpepper, the president of Southwest College.
Thank you. In the words of our ancestors' language in Swahili, to all those who are here and have presented thus far, asante sana. Thank you. Thank you for all that you have said. Thank you for all that you have done for Southwest College. We certainly want to appreciate our chancellor, our first vice president, Nichelle Henderson, and also I want to give another round of applause, and I'm going to ask that you stand. Stand for a moment and let us recognize our student trustee, Callahan, for the work that he did. Thank you. And certainly we are looking forward to the speaker of the hour, Dr. Chike Akua. He will come in his own way, but I just want to share a few thoughts as I welcome you to Southwest College, the home of the Cougars. I want to acknowledge all of our faculty, all of our administration, all of our students who are here. Thank you for being here this afternoon, this morning. It's afternoon now. Well, my days start at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I got to keep time a little better. But thank you for being here this afternoon and experiencing this moment with us as we celebrate Black History Month. 1947, young man sitting in his classroom at a school. Some of you may know the name of the school. It was called Morehouse. It is called Morehouse. He sat there and he began to draft a letter. The letter would eventually be placed in the newspaper called the Maroon Tiger. At the time, it may have not seemed much because this individual wasn't as popular as he has become today. Just a young man at Morehouse, African-American man, thinking about the plight of African-American people. He wrote this letter, and I extract a quote from it. He says, "It seems to me that education has a twofold function to perform in life of man and in society. The one is utility, and the other is culture. Education must enable a man to become more efficient, to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life." This young man, as some of you may have already guessed, is now known to us as Martin Luther King. Even as a young man, as Trustee McCallahan, his writing was prolific. His thought process was astounding, far-reaching, beyond his age, beyond his moment. As I sat and I reflected on Dr. Akua's book, the book that he has available in the lobby, The 7 Steps to Black Student Success, it intersected with this thought that Martin Luther King wrote concerning how it changes a man's life to be more efficient, to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life. Black History Month is about remembering how a people not only strove to be better, but to change the world. For every day that the seed of the African American people grows new fruit, it changes a society, it changes a people, it changes a community. Martin Luther King said it changes it to the point where that individual becomes more efficient. In other words, it begins at home. That individual sees himself greater than his current position or current moment, but sees how his life can change, or see how her life can change the world. And not only that, in becoming efficient, one should understand that part of that efficiency is their culture. In other words, you don't have to lose who you are to be efficient. You don't have to ignore who you are to be your best. There's no need to assimilate, to belong, and to change who you are. It is your culture that makes you who you are. And if you lose your culture, you're no one. And so as we think about these words, and I'll share with you another thought from Dr. Akua's book. He jots down this wonderful word that I heard for the first time when I read his book, the ujat, the ujat. And I looked it up as a researcher does. We just don't read words. We try to find out what they mean. Without meaning, they're just letters on a piece of paper. So I looked it up and I started reading about how the ujat is a reflection of scholars and ancestral thinkers who were identified as wise among their people. And they created this image, this symbol, that every time a document was written by one of them, they would put this eye on the document. It was called papyrus. I don't know if Martin Luther King's letters rise to the letter level of an ujat, Dr. Akua, but I think it comes close. Because the wisdom that he wrote about isn't ujat. It is wisdom that will change the world. Southwest College, faculty, administrators, staff, classifying. What we do here is not about us. It's bigger than any one of us. It's about changing the world. And King said it, if we can teach someone to understand their efficiency and they can become more utility, they can increase the facility to reaching their goals in his life. I'll end with this. One of the ujats that Dr. Akua's book shows, it says, trauma, not transformed, is trauma transferred. What King spoke to is about changing 400 years of trauma, transferring it through knowledge and wisdom. And by transforming it through knowledge and wisdom, we don't transfer it to the next generation. I wish I had time to talk more, but I don't. Dr. Akua is going to do all the talking. Asante, Sana, thank you for being here.
Amazing and powerful. Before I introduce Dr. Lance, I want to give a really huge shout out to our new Vice Chancellor of HR, Tiana Williams. She's right there. Let's give her a round of applause. And now I'll give a shout out to Dr. Lance. Dr. Lance is another person I can always call on. You know, he always come fly, right? He's always working well with the students. And I don't know if you all know, he has 100 Black Men organization where it's chartered at Cal State Long Beach. And the very first time I met Dr. Lance, it was here at Southwest College. And however he found out, he's like, you got a son? And I was like, yeah, I have a son. And he's like, oh, I have this program that your son should be in, and it's at Cal State Long Beach. And I said, no, my son's too young. Then he said, bring him anyway. And when he said that, I'm a believer, I thought about that verse. Train a child. You know it. You know it. Let's hear it. He will never depart. He will never depart, right? So Dr. Lance has this amazing program. I don't know if he has openings, but my son, just very timid and shy, he has flourished. He has flourished, and he's now at the point similar to where Ken is at today. He's half Kenneth's age. He's well-spoken and everything. And I just want to thank Dr. Lance for his work, because it does take a village. It takes a village. All right, Dr. Lance.
Dr. Berry, you trying to mess me up here, getting me all emotional. Nina Akupenda. Say it with me. Say Nina Akupenda. That simply means I love you in Swahili. I asked my son this morning, Dr. Culpepper, could I tell him, I said, would it be appropriate, LJ, if I told my students I love them? He said, Dad, you need context before you do that. He's a smart kid, right? And then I said, well, the way I love them is, the real for me, Nina Kupenda, is I want the best for you. That's what love is. That's what, okay. So you, all these professors and administrators, everybody here or throughout the district, from the chancellor to the trustee, to the teachers, to Ricky on campus, who motivates us as he cleans up. We love you and we want the best for you. And that's what it's about. So someone else, and I want to thank the Black History Committee. I think that's why I was given the honor to say something. So thank you, Dr. Ward, for all you're doing on Black History Committee work here, and everyone else. AAOI, Middle College High School, I know you're in here. Thank you, Middle College. Yes. And I'm not going to keep on thanking people. I'm going to forget. Angel, come up real quick with me, because Angel is our ASO president. And I'm going to read. Thank you, Angel. So when I finish and before Dr. Akua comes up, Angel has a presentation he'll just simply give to Dr. Akua to thank him on behalf of ASO, because we want him to have some gear to have a great memory of this college. Dr. Akua, PhD, is an assistant professor of educational leadership at Clark Atlanta University, one of the most sought after speakers at colleges and universities and educational conferences. And he's here today, y'all. And as an internationally recognized thought leader, Dr. Akua's scholarly research on African-centered education has been published by academic press in the following publications: African-Centered Education, The Theory and Practice 2020, the Journal of Black Studies 2020, The Sage Encyclopedia of African Culture Heritage in North America 2016, and the Handbook of Urban Education in 2014. His most recent book is the revised and expanded edition of Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, 7 Steps to Black Student Success, which is used as a text in a number of colleges and universities nationally. Dr. Akua has written 11 books in all, produced a series of African origin historical videos online, and 70 Black history and African proverb posters, along with an impactful online curricula for students, parents, professional development leaders, teachers, and professors. Dr. Akua earned his doctorate in education policy studies at Georgia State University, a master's degree in education with a concentration in counseling from Clark Atlanta University, and is a cum laude graduate of Hampton University, where he earned a bachelor's arts in education with a concentration in English education. Dr. Akua has been featured in Ebony magazine, and most recently in Black Enterprise magazine for his work as an educational leader. He has helped lead over 1,000 students and parents on trips throughout Egypt, Ghana, Senegal, Morocco, and through the African Genesis Institute. Dr. Akua resides in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US, with his wife of 28 years and their 2 sons. Welcome, Dr. Akua, to Los Angeles Southwest College. And before you, now you presenting with the shirt now, okay? And Dr. Akua, Angel's going to present you with a gift.
Shout out to Dr. Akua for being here. You know, it's very precious that we have somebody like this with a book, written a book, showing to the community coming into the community because we need role models, and he's a role model. So ASO would like to present him this shirt, this lovely shirt that we got here to represent Black History Month. So Dr. Akua, please, if you could take this.
All right. Thank you so much. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate that.
Everybody say it's our time. It's our season. No limits, no boundaries. I see blessings all around me. No limits, no boundaries. I see blessings all around me. Give yourselves a wonderful hand. A great African-American scholar by the name of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays said, it's 11:59 on the clock of destiny. And life is like a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to you to use it. You'll suffer if you lose it, give account if you abuse it. It's only a minute, but eternity is in it. And with that minute, you, me, and we can change and transform the world. Now, if you really believe that we in this place can change and transform the world, would everyone please say Ashe? It's got to be stronger than that. Ashe? That's better. See, Ashe is a West African word which means I agree. It means let it be so. But it also represents the power and the authority that we have to bring things into being through the spoken word and through working together collectively and cooperatively. Ashe? And so it represents the activating energy and the presence of the Spirit that is both within us and around us at all times. And so I'm going to use that word Ashe as a call and response today. Because when I say something, I want you to remember, I'm going to use that word Ashe and have you to repeat it after me. When I say something, I definitely don't want you to forget. I'm going to use that word Ashe and have you to repeat after me. But you don't have to wait until I say it. If I say something that leads to an instant awakening, you can say Ashe. If I say something that resonates with you that was not a part of your education prior to today, you can say Ashe. If I say something that taps your spirit or touches your soul, you can say Ashe. And that lets me know we're all on the same page. Ashe? Wonderful. Well, let me tell you what an honor, privilege, and a blessing it is to be here with you today. I want to give special thanks to Chancellor Rodriguez, to Trustee Nichelle Henderson, to Dr. Regina Smith, to President Culpepper, to Dr. Lance, and to Dr. Nairi Berry, who tracked me down in the midst of all of my travels to make today happen. I think it's so important that you as students know the people who came before you to speak are working on behalf of you. There are people who may not know your name specifically, but they're in meetings. They're at the State House. They're at the White House. They're going to get additional funding so that you can have access to opportunities and education that came at an expense and at a cost to our elders and our ancestors. So for each of those people that I just mentioned, would you give them a strong round of applause, please? I want to bring you greetings from Clark Atlanta University, one of our great HBCUs, where I'm honored to serve in the Department of Educational Leadership on the faculty. And at Clark Atlanta University, our school motto is, I'll find a way or make one. Would you look at your neighbor and say, I'll find a way or make one? And we invite you, when you finish your journey here at Los Angeles Southwest College, that you may want to consider coming to Clark Atlanta University. Ashe? All right. I also want to bring you greetings from Success Quest speakers. I'm part of a group where we go around to different colleges and universities, and we cover a number of different areas, working with leaders, with professors, and directly with students, covering a range of different topics, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, social emotional learning, financial literacy, and student success. You know, whenever African people come together, it's customary that we begin by giving honor to the Most High, who is known by many names and worshiped in many ways, certainly the one source and the one force through which we all live, move, and have our being. Ashe? The symbol you see on the screen here is a West African Adinkra symbol, which is called Jini-Ame. Can everyone say Jini-Ame? And it simply represents the omnipotence of the Most High. And our ancestors were always very, very clear in giving honor to the Most High. It's also customary that we begin by giving honor to our ancestors because there's an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. Ashe? As you look at the faces of these students right here, what you're seeing is a type of joy that doesn't happen enough in education, but it comes as a result of learning knowledge of self. It comes as a result of being exposed to the best of our culture at a time when the worst of our culture is placed in broad media circulation. Ashe? And so when we've had the opportunity to work with students around the country, there's a type of joy that is expressed because so many of them tell me, I never learned these things before. And that maybe if I had learned these things before, I would have had a different educational experience. Ashe? And so as you can see by this slide, I have a very, very big, I'm going to make the most of it today because I believe that this is a divine appointment for me to be here today. Ashe? So President Culpeper mentioned the concept of the ujat. It's been said that a picture is worth what, everybody? 1,000 words, right? So I have some pictures and images that I'm going to be sharing with you that are very, very important. So if you don't mind, would you take your phone out for just a moment? I know most times teachers and professors don't want the phones out in class, but I'm going to ask you to have your phone out. Would you hold your hand, your phone up in the air and wave it like you just don't care? No, I'm just kidding. Just hold up for a second. You're going to see some pictures and some images that are going to be startling, that are going to be shocking, that you're going to want to share with other people. So we need some social media volunteers who will be willing, when you see something that's important to you, that you think that your peers should know, I want you to snap that picture. I want you to get 1 or 2 minute video clips, put it up on Instagram or put it up on Twitter, and let's start a conversation going. Ashe? But, and so I want it to be something that's important to you that you think other people should know. And please tag me on it if you can. Ashe? So our topic today is From History to Destiny. What does it mean to be Black? From history to destiny, what does it mean to be Black? You see, I believe that we need a radical redefinition of Blackness because, as I mentioned before, when most people see our culture, they see the worst of it that has been placed in broad media circulation. They see the gangsterization and criminalization of Black males. Ashe? We see the objectification and the hypersexualization of Black females. Ashe? And by objectification, I mean that they're portrayed as objects of sexual pleasure rather than subjects worthy of dignity and respect, right? And so all of these images get circulated all over the country and all around the world. And what happens is it causes a type of conceptual confusion when people see us. And it leads to the justification of the murder of so many of our young brothers and sisters. And it taints the image of what people think it means to be Black. It affects how white people see Black people. It affects how the Latinx community sees Black people. It affects how the Asian and Pacific Islander Native American community see Black people. But you know what's deeper than that? It affects how Black people see Black people. And I need for you to know that we did not come from a race of pimps, players, criminals, and thugs. Ashe? And we're going to demonstrate that very thoroughly today in this presentation. I'm going to be sharing information with you from my most recent book, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, 7 Steps to Black Student Success. And we do have those available for you today, but I do need to give you a warning. This presentation has been specifically designed to blow your mind. So get ready. And the reason I put this slide in is because many years ago, I was doing a similar type presentation, but the audience got quiet on me. I didn't understand why. And I was talking about this to a friend of mine. He said, man, Chike, people have never seen this stuff before. It's so different from what they've ever seen. So I put this slide in here because, see, I need to know how you're feeling while I'm presenting. So if you're having a mind-blown moment, Can everybody just do this right now? So if at any point in my presentation, your mind is being blown, just do this so that I'll know that it's happening. Ashe? But here's the thing, don't believe a word I say. Do your own research. Don't believe a word that I say. Do your own research, but I promise you, if you do, you'll find some very interesting findings that will harmonize with what I'm going to share with you today. Because what we're going to do right now in the next few minutes is I'm going to take you back to a time when Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. This is a period of time that most people know nothing about. This is a period of time that has been conveniently left out of the textbooks in K through 12 education. Ashe? It's often conveniently left out of the textbooks in higher education as well, unless you may happen to major in Black studies or take a Black studies course or have a conscious and committed professor who's willing to look at these things. Ashe? But there was a time when Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. And so my presentation is broken down into a few different sessions. And each session will be about 10 minutes. The first session is, who were the ancient Kemites and what did they look like? So I want to take you back to a time when all life on planet Earth began. It began deep in Central Africa where that big red arrow is, right near Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And what we today call Africa in ancient times was called Alkebulan. Everybody say Alkebulan. Now look at what that means, everybody. It means land of the spirit people. Why land of the spirit people? It's because we brought spirit to everything that we did. We brought spirit to reading and writing and language and literature, architecture and engineering and agriculture and astronomy, mathematics and medicine and science and technology. But now we live in a society that attempts to despiritualize us. As a matter of fact, in the research literature, there's a term called spirit killing. That when our children go to school, they're oftentimes in places where they're seen as a problem rather than as people, and their spirits are being killed in the miseducation process. Ashe? And so all life on planet Earth began deep in Central Africa at the base of the Nile River, and great empires sprang up along the Nile River Valley. The Nile River was the world's first cultural superhighway. It facilitated transportation as they sailed up and down the river. It facilitated communication, because as they're sailing up and down the river, they're meeting new people and establishing diplomatic relations. It facilitated irrigation of crops as they built canals off of the Nile River to irrigate their crops, and thus civilization. And many of these great empires that began to spring up, the original names are so very, very important, because what we today call Sudan in ancient times was called Nubia. Everybody say Nubia. What we today call Egypt in ancient times was called Kemet. Everybody say Kemet. And what we today call Ethiopia in ancient times was called Kush. Everybody say Kush. Well, Kush has different meanings to different people, right? I learned this a few years ago when I was at Tuskegee University, and I was doing a similar presentation at the biomedical symposium, and they enjoyed it so much they asked me, Dr. Akua, can you go to nearby Booker T. Washington High School and do this for some of our high school students? And so I did, but when I got to this point in the presentation, instead of the 200 or 300 students saying Kush, they all fell out laughing. And I was so embarrassed. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know I said anything funny. What was so funny? They said, Dr. Akua, when we say Kush, we're referring to. I said, So we just had to make that. We had to take that straight to the ATM. ATM, a teachable moment. Ashe? A teachable moment. And so what we did was, the first thing that we had to do was we had to take that to the sociology class. And I asked the question, how many of y'all know somebody that's locked up? And I asked the same to you. Would you raise your hand if you know somebody that's locked up? Keep your hand up, look around the room. There's most people in here. That's the same thing I asked of them, similar response. But I told them, isn't it interesting that somebody took the name of your sacred, holy homeland mentioned in Genesis 2 of the Bible, that the Garden of Eden was right near, right near Ethiopia, or the land of Cush. And then I asked them, I said, since so many of you all know somebody that's locked up, isn't it interesting Do you know that all of the chemicals that you need to get high are already in your body? You don't need to smoke anything. We just haven't been taught the African sacred science that would teach you how to trigger the release of those chemicals, because then you could be high all the time. Look, I'm high right now, y'all. I haven't been smoking, no. I haven't been smoking. The only thing I've been drinking is this water. But when you understand who you are, whose you are, where you come from, and where you're going, you can walk around high all the time. Ashe? But then we had to go back to we had to go to the science class, and we talked about how all of those chemicals are already in your body. And then we looked at it sociologically and we said, but isn't it interesting? And I presented this at the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I presented a challenge. I said, would you all do some research with your students and find out the number of black people who have been arrested for possession or distribution of marijuana? And then compare them to the number of white people who are now the new multimillionaires in the cannabis industry. How does that happen? You mean for decades, you decimate our families and communities by arresting mostly black males for possession or distribution of marijuana? But then you come to the conclusion, oh, wait a minute. This is a cash cow. We could make billions off of this. Let's just go ahead and sign it into law. This is legal now. But what about the families and communities that you have decimated? Ashe? It's very interesting. So all of that just from the name Kush. Those are the things that come to mind. But as I mentioned, all life on planet Earth began deep in Central Africa. And in these great empires, you all know the difference between an empire and a kingdom? An empire is made up of many different kingdoms. And so Nubia, Kush, and Kemet were empires made up of many different kingdoms. The empire that I want to focus on today is that of Kemet, because Kemet was a repository that did the best job of documenting all of the high tech and high science of the entire Nile Valley. Ashe? So as we look at the roots of the name Kemet, when you see this kind of writing, what is that kind of writing called, everybody? Interesting answer. Hieroglyphics. Interesting thing is, hieroglyphics is a Greek term, and that's not Greek writing. Ashe? So one of the challenges that we have when we want to study about our history and culture is that we can't do it from our original languages because our original languages were taken from us. Ashe? And I need for you to understand that your language is your lens. And so the original name for this kind of writing is called Medu Neter. Everybody say Medu Neter. And so as my friend Tony Browder tells us in his book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, when you look at the construction of the name Kemet, it tells us everything that we need to know. So for example, the charred or burnt piece of wood represents the K and the M sound. They didn't use vowels the way that we do today. Later scholars will come along and add vowels for ease of pronunciation. The owl represents the M sound, and the bread loaf represents the T sound. Now, this by itself, everybody, means black. What does that mean? I can't hear you. What is it? Okay. In Medu Neter writing, there's something called a determinative, and a determinative determines what the rest of the word is referring to. What did you say that meant right there? Black. Well, X with a circle around it means nation. So what does this mean together, everybody? I promise you, you will not see this on the History Channel. And you should ask yourself, why is that? I promise you, you won't see this in social studies textbooks at the K through 12 level. And I need for you to ask the question, why is that? Ashe? In many college level textbooks, you won't see this kind of information. And you should ask yourself, why is that? So I have to go to great lengths to prove my point. And so what I did was I went and I got some statues, some images of ancient Kemetic statues, and I put them right alongside modern day African Americans whose names and faces you would recognize to approximate their appearance so that you could see what the ancient Kemites look like. Ashe? Because they've been completely represented in movies, cartoons, and documentaries. So for example, take a look at the face of King Mentuhotep. When I see the face of King Mentuhotep and I'm trying to approximate what he must have looked like, I said, man, he looks a little bit like LeBron James, right? Congratulations to the king for breaking the scoring record, Ashe. And then when I look at the face of King Khafre, that profile, I said, man, I've seen that face before. Where have I seen that face before? And then when I look at the face of King Amenhotep the third, take a look at the high cheekbones, the nose, the lips. I said, man, he looks a lot like a former NFL player by the name of Adrian Peterson. Can you see a slight similarity there? Ashe? When I see the face of Queen T, of the famed 18th dynasty of ancient Kemet, who ruled alongside her husband Amenhotep III, and was very instrumental in creating diplomatic relations. You've seen this face many times before, whether you realize it or not. This may be the first time you saw this particular picture, but you've seen that face many times before. You just may not have known that that's what you were looking at, that when you were looking at Queen T, you're really looking at the face of former First Lady Michelle Obama. Ashe? When we look at the face of King Amenemhet, take a look at the wide nose, the thick lips, even though it's been chiseled off because people wanted to do away with the telltale signs of who these people were. Ashe? You can see the locks. When I saw that, I said, man, he looks a lot like a brother who used to play defensive back for the Atlanta Falcons named Dante Robinson. Can you see a slight similarity there? When I look at the face of King Senwosret, I see the actor Mahershala Ali. When I look at the face of King Huni, I got to take you all the way back to the golden age of hip hop with KRS-One, Ashe, whose name means knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everything. When I see the face of Queen Amenertis, I see Lupita Nyong'o. When I see the face of King Narmer, also known as Ahamina, who was the founding king of Kemet, who united Upper Kemet and Lower Kemet, look at the eyes. Look at the nose, the lips, the cheekbones. To me, he looks a lot like the gospel singer Kirk Franklin. Can you see it? And so here's the thing, everybody. When I look at us, I see kings and queens, but we have been trained to see each other as niggas and bitches. Excuse my language, but I think I need to say it again. When I look at us, I see kings and queens, but when we look at each other, we have been skillfully trained to see the N word and the B word. Is this making sense? And so as we go a little bit further, I just wanted to approximate the appearance, but that cannot necessarily be said to be scientific. So let's be scientific right now. And let's go to one of the preeminent scientists of the 20th century, none other than Dr. Chike Diop. He was an historian, a linguist. He was a physicist, an anthropologist, political scientist, an activist. And while he was working on his doctorate at the Sorbonne, which is the University of Paris, he went to the Louvre Museum in Paris and he said, if you will give me access to the royal mummies of Kemet, I can prove scientifically that these were in fact Black people, indigenous African people. Now imagine that, a child of Africa having to go into a museum in Europe to get the artifacts of his own ancestors. Because all of our artifacts are mainly in European museums, Ashe. Louvre Museum in Paris, the British Museum in London, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, Ashe. But he said, if you will give me access to the mummies, I can perform a test to scientifically demonstrate that these were Black people. Dr. Diop had created 12 areas of empirical evidence. Empirical meaning hard physical evidence, not just speculation. How many areas of evidence? 12. One of those areas of evidence was called the melanin dosage test. He said, if you will give me access to the royal mummies of Kemet, I will take a skin sample, and I will put that skin sample in a solution of ethyl benzoate. And when you put it in a solution of ethyl benzoate, the melanocytes are the cells which contain the melanin, which is the skin pigment. And those cells will become fluorescent, and I can count the number of melanocytes to determine the skin tone of the mummy of the person that I'm analyzing, because those cells do not deteriorate over time. Ashe? Do you think they gave him access to the mummies? Of course not. But Dr. Diop was unrelenting. And he continued for 2 years to petition them to give him access to the royal mummies. Finally, after 2 years, they gave him access to the mummies. Now, I want you to take a good look at this picture of Dr. Diop. Take a good look at his picture, because when I tell you what he said, you'll understand why I'm telling you to look carefully at his picture. This is a direct quote from him. He said, "They were black, more black than I." That reminds me of some social media posts that I've seen where people will say, "I'm black 365, but in February I'm blackety black," right? But Dr. Diop said they were black, more black than I. You can see that this is a dark-skinned, indigenous African brother. But here's where it gets deep, everybody. He said, "I have found that many other people have done the same research before me, but they never published their findings." Yeah, the reason I know this is because the skin of many mummies had been completely scraped. So the reason they wouldn't give him access to the mummies is because they had already performed the same experiment and they knew what the answer was and did not want to make it known. You would be amazed at the great lengths some people will go to make sure you don't know who you are, Ashe? Because people make multi-billions of dollars a year off of your ignorance. As long as I can keep you thinking that you're nothing but a pimp, player, criminal, thug, nigga, and bitch, then I can make multi-billions of dollars off of your ignorance every single year. Ashe, would you raise your hand if you're learning something right now? Keep your hand up, look around the room. Would you put up another hand with that one? Put up another hand if you know somebody else who should be here right now. I say, look around the room, all right? So next time they tell you that something's going on in here, y'all got to get your friends to turn out. But here's session 2. Now that we know who they were and what they look like, what did the ancient Kemites accomplish? What did they accomplish? Well, one of the best places to start would be with Imhotep. He was the first recorded doctor in human history. Not only was he a doctor, he was the architect of the Step Pyramid, which is the first stone skyscraper in human history. He was a mathematician. He was an advisor to the king, priest, poet, multidisciplinary genius. Now, every time you see that wonderful face right there, I want you to replace that face with your face, because you got to go back and see it for yourself. I got to a point where it wasn't enough for me to read about it in a book or in a magazine or in a newspaper or see it in a documentary. I had to go back and see it for myself. I want you to replace that face with your face, because you need to go back and see it for yourself. So who's that in that picture, everybody? That's you. And I lead study tours to the motherland, and that's something that we may need to look at doing in the near future with this group of students. Ashe? Raise your hand if you would be interested in going on a study tour to learn these things, okay? So let's kind of hold that thought in mind, because thoughts have power, Ashe? But why is it that when a movie comes out, you can set your watch and your clock to this? Every 5 years or so, they will come out with a movie depicting the ancient Kemites as anything other than indigenous African people, Ashe? Oftentimes, white folk with a tan. Every 5 years, you can set your clock to it. Not only that, every 5 years, they'll come out with some movie about a character in the Bible, and none of them will be African either, Ashe? That's a whole different lecture that we do on the African origins of our faith. But the point that I'm making here is we go back, we can look at the oldest mathematics textbook, the Amza Mathematics Papyrus. It contains, this is a small portion of the papyrus. And you may not be able to read the writings of the Medu Neter, but this contains examples of algebra, trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, square root, area, circumference, volume, and much, much more. Ashe? It's almost 4,000 years old, but it's known to be a copy of an older African text. Somebody say, how do you know? Because in the document, the writer Amos says this is a copy of an older African text. But if you haven't had the opportunity to learn your original languages, how would you know? Was Medu Neter offered at your high school? Medu Neter 1, Medu Neter 2, 3. Well, what languages were you offered? Just call it out. Let's see. We got English, we got French, we got Spanish, we got All the languages of the colonizer. And I told you before, your language is your lens. So when your language is snatched from you, you don't even know your indigenous culture the way that you could or should. Ashe? Interesting. In addition to the Alms Mathematics Papyrus, written into the preface is the scientific method. Our ancestors said that this is the correct method for investigating all things, to know all things, each mystery and every secret. Ashe? You may not be able to read the writings of the Medu Neter, but you see some shapes that you recognize, yes? Let's make a hypothesis, which is an educated guess. What shapes do you see, and what do you think that this ancient worksheet could have been used to create? I can't hear you. Pyramid, very good. You're absolutely correct. So now take a look at this. Let me see whose first eye is open and awake. How many pyramids do you see in this picture? Call out your answer. Repeat after me, please. Sometimes in life, you got to look twice. So let's count them out from the ones at the bottom, from left to right. Count it with me. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, okay. Now look at the big three pyramids. Which one do you think is the Great Pyramid? A, B, or C? Call out your answer. I'm hearing A, B, and C. It's not all the above, y'all. But the correct answer is actually C, the one on the far right. But this has to be like math class. It's not enough to have the correct answer. You got to know why the answer is what it is. Ashe? And the reason that that's the Great Pyramid, before going to Kemet myself, I always thought the one in the middle was the largest one, that it was the Great Pyramid. But in fact, if you look very carefully, you discover, first of all, it's closer to the camera. And if you look down to the bottom right, it's sitting on higher ground. All the way over to the far right is the Great Pyramid, 481 feet high, covering an area of 13 acres. The only one of the wonders of the world that's still standing. It's such a mathematical, architectural, and engineering marvel that some people have actually suggested that it wasn't built by human hands, and certainly not black hands. It must have been built by... How did we all get the same program? We didn't even practice that before I got here, did we? So we've all heard the same lies. We were also told what was the purpose of these pyramids. Who knows? The burial grounds, tombs, right? Nope, wrong again. These were astronomical observatories where we calculated the precession of the stars and constellations. There are passageways inside of the pyramids that are perfectly aligned to certain stars and to certain constellations. Ashe? As a matter of fact, the pyramid is again a Greek term. And remember, your language is your lens. The original term is mir. Everybody say mir. Mir means place of ascension. That this is where our ancestors came to study the sacred sciences, where they would ascend and rise higher in their consciousness as they were studying the heavens. And they said, as above, so below. Meaning that there is order in the heavens above, there should be order in the earth beneath. Ashe? As above, so below, and as within, so without. That we produce our reality based on our thoughts, feelings, and emotions within. Ashe? But to those who want to persist with the lie that the pyramids were built by aliens, all we have to do is go to the Alms Mathematics Papyrus. Problem number 56, a number of other problems, but problem number 56 shows them calculating the slope of the pyramids that they would build. Ashe? Dr. Theophilo Benga tells us that electronic calculators in use today have not come up with breakdowns superior to those in the special table of the Papyrus Rend, the Alms Mathematics Papyrus. Notice he calls it the Papyrus Rend. That's what most Egyptologists call it. You know why? Because the early Egyptologists had the rather unsettling habit of naming the different Kemetic books after the Europeans who either bought them or stole them, rather than after the Africans themselves. Ashe? So that's why I want to give you the original name, the Amos Mathematics Papyrus, rather than the Wren Papyrus. But these are the things that have to happen when we conduct research. We have to go back to our original languages. Ashe? So here we see African progressive perfection. We have Imhotep's step pyramid. Then Seneferu comes along. And he wants to build a true pyramid without the steps, but he mismeasured his angles. We even know the mistakes that our ancestors made. He mismeasured his angle, and now they call it the bent pyramid. Can you see why they call it the bent pyramid? But that's okay. He went back and he remeasured his angles and he was able to build a true pyramid. Then his son Khufu comes along and builds the Great Pyramid. And his son Khafre, the brother that looked like Kobe Bryant, builds the next largest one. And then his son Menkaure builds the next largest pyramid. What we see is African progressive perfection, each generation improving upon the last. But do you know that sociologists and demographers tell us that this might be the first generation of African American students who will not exceed the accomplishments of their parents? We got to change that. Turn to your neighbor and say, we got to change that. Ashe? African progressive perfection. So now we've gone to the Nile Valley of Africa, all the way to Washington, D.C. in America. You know, most people, when they look at this picture of the Lincoln Memorial, they don't know that they're looking at an exact replica of an African monument. So what we see here is King Ramesu. The Greeks called him Ramesses. And here you see him seated in the same meditative posture as Lincoln. You say, well, come on, Dr. Akua, that's just a coincidence. Well, if I showed you the original artist's conception of what the Lincoln Memorial was supposed to look like, it was actually a picture just like this, but with a pyramid behind him. Other people study us very carefully, y'all. They study us very, very carefully. But this is Ramesu. And when I take you to the temple of Abu Simbel, you will see not one, but how many colossal statues of Ramesu do you see? How many do you see? You see 4 colossal statues. One was destroyed by an earthquake. We were master builders who built for eternity. If any time you see something destroyed, it was typically destroyed by the colonizer. But in this case, that one was destroyed by an earthquake. But how many colossal statues are there? 4. One more time. How many? Okay. So when you walk inside, in between these statues, you come to the door of a temple. And something amazing happens inside this temple, y'all. Only 2 times a year. How many times a year? The sun shines a beam of light down this corridor to light up the face of the statue of the king. How many times a year? 2 times a year, on the day of his coronation, on the day of his birth. Now, what kind of architectural, engineering, mathematical mastery did these ancient Africans have to have? We bad, y'all. Damn. Where do you even begin to calculate that? But then we find out that the temple wasn't built from the ground up. It was actually carved out of the side of a mountain. They literally dug inside the mountain, chiseled away the excess rock, and then carved those statues that are really pillars holding everything up. And then they began to carve into the walls from floor to ceiling, and even on the ceiling, the writings of the Medu Neter. Ashe? And how many colossal statues of Ramesu did you say you saw? I can't hear you. How many? 4 faces carved into this. Where have I seen 4 faces carved into the side of a mountain before? Oh, yeah, you know, the founding fathers of America studied your history and culture very, very thoroughly. And they wanted to build a nation as great as ancient Kemet, and they knew they could not do it without African people. That's one of the reasons you got a pyramid and an all-seeing eye on the back of your dollar bill. Because they were studying in secret what they refused to teach you in the open. Ashe? They were studying in secret what they refused to teach you in the open. They have accessed your sacred sciences and use it to empower themselves, but oppress everybody else. Ashe? As Ashra Kwesi says, somebody knows something about you that you don't even know about yourself. Somebody knows something about you that you don't even know about yourself. And they make multi-billions of dollars a year off of your ignorance. Ashe? Here's the Washington Monument, tallest structure in Washington, D.C. Now we can make an educated guess, a hypothesis, an educated guess. Where do you think the design came from? You're absolutely right. This is a picture of Hatshepsut's Tekken. Hatshepsut is a woman who became king of Kemet and ruled for over 20 years. Ashe? The Tekken is a symbol of strength and stability. And I specifically took this picture of a Tekken with the sun rising behind it. The Greeks called it an obelisk. We called it a Tekken. I took it with the picture of the sun rising behind it because, among other things, it was used to tell the time of day. You could tell what time of day it was based on the way that the Tekken cast a shadow. And when you looked at the shadow, it acted as the hands of a clock. Ashe? Interesting, when you hear the word technology, you usually hear it in a phrase, modern technology. Most people don't associate technology with ancient technology. So all this stuff is real good, Dr. Akua, but they don't have the kind of technology that we have today. But do you know that our so-called technology today has, as Dr. Naeem Akbar said, outstripped our humanology, our ability to care for one another, our ability to love one another, our ability to live in community with one another, our ability to not kill one another, our ability to not traumatize one another. The technology has outstripped our humanology, our ability to relate to one another. And if you want to talk technology, understand that it comes from the Greek term teknos, which comes from the Kemetic word tekken. Ashe? But we had a whole different value structure around the development of our technology. So now take a look at the Washington Monument. Isn't it interesting? George Washington owned African people as slaves, but they choose an African symbol to memorialize them. That's almost like an insult, Ashe. But here you see the Washington Monument in front of a reflecting pool. Imagine my amazement when I get to the Temple of Amun-Ra, and there is your reflecting pool, and over to the left is your Tekken. Ashe. People have studied this very, very carefully, and they know something about you that you don't know about yourself. Ashe? If you're learning something, I'd like for you to get a shot of this next slide, please. I send out teaching tips and brief video clips about history and culture from time to time. If you will text Dr. Akua to 22828, and you can just take a shot of it right now, you can do that later. But I send out something about once or twice a month. If you want to receive an email with a brief video clip, also letting you know where I am in the country and so forth, then get a shot of that and you can register in our system. I promise not to spam you, Ashe. But also, please feel free to follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, because I do post videos there as well. Ashe? So as we go a little bit further, we're talking about a time when Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. When we talk about wealth creation, y'all, I want to let you know about one of the other members of Success Quest speakers. His name is J.R. Fenwick, because he is our financial literacy consultant. He teaches students how to trade in the stock market in order to understand financial literacy. Ashe? And it opens up so many possibilities for them. Because in our community, we have typically had people who had cultural consciousness, but no capital. Then we have people who have capital, but no consciousness. And the two groups typically tend to talk about one another. The people with the consciousness say, hey, y'all people with the capital, you should be building Black schools and build Black businesses and do things in the community. And you should help us out. And the people with the capital say, hey, y'all need to get a job. Stop complaining. America is the best place in the world. Save your money and invest it. And the two groups continue to butt heads. But I realized years ago that I had to be that brother that had capital and consciousness. Ashe? That way, when you get a good idea, a great idea, or a God idea, you can take it and run with it and do something to build something for your people. Ashe? And that's why we're doing a capital and consciousness tour. And so J.R. Fenwick with flipthatstock.com, he teaches students the stock market. And it is an absolute game changer. Ashe? So now we're on to session 3. And session 3 is inspired by some questions that I have been asked over the years. Well, all this is real good, Dr. Akua, but all this stuff you're telling us about ancient Kemet, that's in East Africa, and most African Americans were captured from West Africa. So session 3 asked the question, what is the relationship between African Americans, East Africans, and West Africans? Let's take a look. Did you know that there were 6 mass migrations out of East Africa? When the Nile Valley was inundated by invaders, Arabs, Persians, Greeks, and Romans, there were 6 mass migrations out of East Africa to West Africa. And when they went to West Africa, they took their culture with them, Ashe? And that's what allowed them to build the great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And so as Dr. Hassimi Maiga teaches us, West Africans are not really West Africans, they're East Africans who traveled west. One more time, West Africans are not really West Africans, they are East Africans who traveled west. And when they traveled west, they took their culture with them. They took their philosophy with them. They took their architecture, their engineering, their mathematics, and their medicine with them. And so now there are places in West Africa where our people know that history. For example, in the Asebu region of Ghana, they know that they are the direct descendants of ancient Kemet. And this is why myself and several other African-American researchers were installed just this past September as chiefs in the Asebu region of Ghana to help them piece their history back together. Ashe? Because you have to remember, here in America, we were miseducated as a result of being enslaved. But on the continent, they were miseducated as a result of being colonized. Ashe? Yeah, so they got the same miseducation that we did. I never forget when I realized that years ago when Nelson Mandela's book came out in the early 90s, and I was listening to the audio book, and he was taught growing up that Europeans discovered South Africa. I said, wait a minute, I've heard the same lie before, only here in America, right? And so you have to understand that white supremacy ideology is a global phenomenon, not just here. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing tried to teach us about this way back in the early 70s, that the numerical inadequacy of Europeans would get them to the point where they felt that they had to do ethnic cleansing on any and everybody who did not look like them. Ashe? These population politics are fueling a lot of the political backlash that we see happening today. Because you've heard of the browning of America, right? And that the population of black and brown people is only increasing. For the first time in American history, children of color comprise the majority of public school students. That number will only be increasing, even if they could build a wall at the border. That number will only be increasing, and there are a whole lot of people who are not pleased about that. Ashe? So we have to understand these types of things. Also in West Africa, we have the University of Jané. We have the University of Sankore at Timbuktu. We had a saying when I was growing up, man, I'll knock you all the way. I didn't know that was a real place, much less one of the great learning centers of the world where people came from all over Africa, Asia, and Europe to study from our ancestors. Even today, there are over 100,000 manuscripts at Timbuktu that have yet to be translated. Ashe? Manuscripts from all sorts of different disciplines where we need young scholars who can do something about that. What answers are we missing to humanity's greatest problems because we have not explored Africa's contributions and solutions? We haven't looked as we should at the majesty of the Moors who lifted Europe out of the Dark Ages with their science and technology. And they ruled Spain for almost 800 years and had an influence throughout all of Europe. That's a whole separate presentation, but I'm just trying to share with you something that Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, a Puerto Rican African historian, said. He said, African history is the missing pages of world history. Ashe? So I'm going to do one more session, y'all, because we have to ask the question also, were the first Americans Africans? You know, when we get in conversations like this, some very ignorant person will oftentimes say, well, why don't y'all just go back to where you came from? Hello, I'm here. We here. Why don't you go back to where you came from? But we here. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima was asking the same question, were African people in America before Columbus? And he published his findings in a book called They Came Before Columbus, the African presence in ancient America. And what he discovered was that there were many other people, once again, same as Dr. Diop, there were many other people who explored this. Interesting thing, these are Olmec stone heads, dated to be over 3,000 years old. But these weren't found in Africa. These were found in Mexico. Now take a look at the nose. Take a look at the lips. Repeat after me. That's us, y'all. That's us, y'all. I think it should be pretty clear. If it wasn't clear with that one, it should be clear with this one. Repeat after me. That's us, y'all. And if you go around to the back, you can even see the cornrows. That's us, y'all. And see, this is why we need to understand the cultural intersections between us and our Latinx community, Ashe? Because once we realize these intersections, we will be unified in ways that other people find very disturbing. Ashe? But remember, I said there were others who did this research, but their work was not properly circulated. Alexander von Wuthenau did the research decades ago, almost 100 years ago, Unexpected Faces in Ancient America. A Harvard professor, Leo Wiener, also did a study. But did you know that white scholars, even their work, when they tell the truth, sometimes it gets buried as well? Ashe? And so when we look at these faces, one of my former videographers, Pierre Carson, is standing next to one of those. He's 6 feet tall, just to give you an idea of how massive they are. But you know what else? An interesting thing happens. I didn't know this until I really started doing research. I haven't had the opportunity to travel to this particular part of Mexico yet. But when you go to Mexico, there are pyramids in Mexico that have very similar dimensions to the ones in Kemet. And there's a reason for that. One of the reasons is because when Africans came to the Americas thousands of years ago, they engaged in cultural exchange rather than extermination. Ashe? Cultural exchange rather than extermination of the indigenous population. And that is why you see a great deal of similarity and symmetry in the architecture. Ashe? Dr. David Imhotep, in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, he tells us the oldest skeletal remains found in the Americas are of blacks. And he's citing the research of an earlier archaeologist named Marquez. And he says Marquez observed that long ago, the youthful America was a Negro continent. Was that in any of the history books that you had growing up? Isn't that interesting? And this is why we have to understand our connection to our indigenous family as well. That's why when you look at traditional Kemetic iconography in Medu Neter, this is Ma'at. This is a black woman who is shown with wings outstretched. And Ma'at represents 7 principles. Repeat after me: truth, justice, righteousness, reciprocity, balance, order, and harmony. And it was said that these were the principles that were used to create the universe, create the world, and sustain the world and the universe. And it's represented by a black woman with arms outstretched with feathers. This is your first concept of an angel as well, Ashe? But it's also one of the reasons why we see a cultural exchange amongst indigenous people, where you will see that they're dressed in similar garb. Ashe? So I ask you the question that one of my elders, Dr. Joyce King, asked me. Whose knowledge is worth knowing? Whose knowledge is worth knowing? Why is this not across the curriculum? You know, I run into students all the time as I speak at colleges, universities all over the country. And sometimes I even run into some of my former students. And when I was a doctoral student at Georgia State, I ran into one of my former students from back when I taught middle school. She was now in college. I said, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, Mr. Akua, how are you?" And we got to talking, and now she was a student at Georgia State. I was working on my doctorate. She was an undergrad. I said, "Hey, what's your major?" She said, "Psychology." I said, "Oh, man, you're in the right place. One of the greatest black psychologists who ever walked the planet was on the faculty at Georgia State University." She said, "Who's that?" I said, "You mean you haven't read anything about Dr. Asa Hilliard? He was here for over 20 years before he passed." She said, "No, I've never heard that name before." I said, "Well, have you heard of Dr. Wade Nobles? Have you heard of Dr. Amos Wilson?" Have you heard of Dr. Linda James Myers? She said, I don't recognize any of those names. I said, wow. So now everywhere I go, I got to put together these bibliographies from different disciplines. Because oftentimes when we go to these schools, we're taught somebody else's intellectual tradition that, as Asa Hilliard says, takes us far away from ourselves. And you can go from pre-K to postdoctorate thinking you have an education and not know anything about your ancestral tradition. Ashe? So I started putting together these bibliographies of the books that you should study based on your major in addition to whatever your professor is assigning you. Because as Dr. Malefi Asante says, you got to take two sets of notes. The notes that your professor assigns you and then the notes that your ancestors assign you. I feel like I earned 2 doctorates. I feel like I earned 2 doctorates because for every assignment, I had to do what the professor was asking, and then I had to go and read the works of our great scholar warriors. And I had to ask the question, what does Dr. Asa Hilliard say about this in Saba, The Reawakening of the African Mind? What does Maulana Karinga have to say about this in Introduction to Black Studies? What does Dr. Charles Finch have to say about this in his book, The Star of Deep Beginnings, The African Genesis of Science and Technology? What does Marimba Ani have to say about this in her book, Yurugu? And all these different African scholars whose work I had to seek out to make sure that once I got the degree, I could actually serve my own people. Ashe? Whose knowledge is worth knowing. And so as I begin to close, brothers and sisters, we've taken a journey, but I want you to know that each slide that I've shown you could be a separate 1-hour presentation by itself. There was a time when we led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. But I have to ask you, how did powerful and proud Africans go from this to this? And then, how did we go from this to this? There's been some social engineering going on. And when you don't know who you are, you will dishonor your ancestors. But when we find out the truth of who we are, we will replicate and recreate the best of our culture. Sometimes I've had people say, this is really deep, Dr. Akua, but you know what? I'm just trying to pay the bills. I'm trying to pay the rent. I'm trying to pay the mortgage. I'm trying to feed these kids. What does any of this have to do to help me to do that? And my thing is, why I can't answer that any better than Dr. Amos Wilson did in his book, The Falsification of African Consciousness. I want you to read the part that's in bold and underlined. Are y'all ready? Here we go. If there were not a direct relationship between history and, then why is it that the European rewrote history? One more time, everybody. If there were not a direct relationship between history and, then why is it that the European rewrote history? There's a whole lot of people out there today who don't want you to think the way you're thinking right now, who don't want you to know what I have shared with you. And other African-centered scholars like myself have sacrificed mightily to bring this information to you. Ashe? And so as I close, I want to leave you with a few quotes. The first of which comes from a tremendous human and civil rights activist, Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, never forget where you came from and always praise the bridges that carried you over. Ashe? If you understand that, you'll understand why James Baldwin said, our crowns have been bought and paid for. All we have to do is put them on our heads. And lastly, brothers and sisters, this information, this knowledge comes with a responsibility. We must honor our ancestral obligations, and we have work to do. And it may seem difficult work to do, but I want you to remember this African proverb that says that if you dream of moving mountains tomorrow, you must first begin by moving small stones today. Peace and blessings. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Akua. Before we close, if you have any questions, please let us know. But before we begin our Q&A, I want to give a shout out. I saw a few here, but I apologize. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Lawrence Bradford and Dr. Jamil Carter. I know I saw them running here, but a lot of this couldn't be done with them. So shout out to them. And then if you all, does anyone have any questions in regards to this? A lot of good information here. Do you have any questions? Okay. Dr. Jones, do you want to assist us with the questions? And I'll just pass this mic over back to Dr. Akua. Yes.
Okay, so as we do the Q&A, I'd like to ask you if you have a question, to state your question within 30 seconds so that we can get as many in as possible at this time. Okay, so who wants to get us started? If you just raise your hand. Yes, brother. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the sister over here first. You have to speak up loud. You say, do I have a video of this? Yes, we're recording today, but you can see a number of my video clips on YouTube. And I do actually have a free online course. If you go to freeintrotoafricanorigins.com, I should have put that slide up here, but freeintrotoafricanorigins.com. If you go on there and you put your email address in, our system will send to you 6 videos, 1 per day for 6 days. And it contains a lot of this kind of information.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was very enlightening, and this is just very new to me, a whole lot of.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
do
I appreciate that.
it. Thank you.
And thank you for coming out today. Brother, got to speak up. I can't hear you.
Subjected to be treated and looked at how we looked at, and they have this this lap ahead of us from all of these years. How are we going to catch up?
So so that I understand the question correctly, you're saying because others have such a head start against us as a result of the inequities in society, how are we going to catch up?
More than a head start.
Oh yeah, far more than a head start. Absolutely. One of the things that I found is that Black power always rises to the top. That once we get an opportunity, you look at the places and spaces where we get an opportunity, we always take the fast track to the top. So I'm not worried so much about closing that gap. I am more interested in knocking down the barriers that prevent us from closing the gap. And so that's part of your work. That's part of my work. That's part of all of our work to find out what will be your unique contribution to the elevation of our people and to the forward flow of humanity. So when people ask me, what my purpose is, I tell them everything I do is wrapped around these 2 things: the resurrection of African people and the redemption of humanity. And you cannot have one without the other. You won't have the redemption of humanity without the resurrection of African people. And when African people are resurrected, you will see the redemption of humanity. Ashe? So I wouldn't worry so much about the gaps that we have to close. It's about standing up and taking your rightful place, finding what your purpose and mission is for being on the planet, despite any barriers that may be in front of you, and taking advantage of all of the blessings that our elders and ancestors have provided for us. Okay? But thank you for that question. All right. Yes, back here. I saw somebody's hand up. Yes, right there.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the lecture. My question to you is, do you share your bibliography by major of all the other documents that people should be reading?
So I do share it. I ask if you want to get one of my cards from my table when we leave here. My books are out front and everything. And I ask students to email me and tell me what their major is. And if I've created a bibliography for that particular major, I will be glad to send it to you. And what we find is that, typically most professors at some point in a semester will allow you to do a research paper or some kind of project. And we always encourage students to utilize that bibliography, utilize it throughout the whole class, throughout the whole semester in the term. And whenever you're asked to write something, cite Black scholars. Seek and cite Black scholars. But not just any Black scholars, Because some black scholars, they're only seeking and citing white scholars. No, not those aren't the ones we're talking about. Cite those black scholars that are doing research on behalf of black people, right? Some people call them scholar warriors. Some people call them scholar activists. But we want you to cite those black scholars because oftentimes many people have not been exposed to that. And unless you're intentional about exposing yourself to it, then you won't get that information either. Ashe? So thank you for that question.
If I may, I have a comment here for those who are participating on YouTube Live, and this is in response to your question. Mia Gaskin says, look to all other history. Even Japanese people were so far behind, quote unquote, by centuries when the colonizers got to Japan, and in 80 years, Japan caught up to the rest of the world, and now they're advanced.
That is such a powerful statement and so true. And I want to thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. The Japanese were bombed into the Stone Age, Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. But as that person mentioned, in just 2 or 3 generations now, most of our electronics come from them. Ashe? So there are many other examples in history. And this yet again is another reason why ethnic studies is so very important, right? So we have to learn the truth that has been hidden about all of these different ethnicities. But they say charity begins where?
At home.
At home. So you got to learn about yourself first and then learn the cultural intersections that we have with other people. Ashe? All right. So thank you for that. All right. Another question? Yes.
So at the beginning of the presentation, which the whole presentation was.
Can you hold your mic up a little more?
Yeah.
Speak
So
louder.
at the beginning of the presentation, you kind of mentioned how when they were looking at some of the mummies and trying to confirm that they were of African origin, a lot of the people who had them in the museums, they scraped off like the skin, or they've already proven that they were black, but they hid that information away. So when we look at modern media today, we see that there's the negatives of black media is commodified, but also the positives, like how mummies are presented in museums and whatnot, that's also commodified. So regardless of the negative or positives of our own history and culture, everything's commodified. So with this information, how do we, I guess, decommodify or make it less profitable to other cultures to use our history and our image for other things that don't benefit us?
So that's a great question. One of the things that has to happen is we first have to be prepared to take control of our artifacts once again. So for example, if you go to Egypt today and you get off the plane in Cairo, you're going to see primarily Arabs. And you're going to say, wait a minute, Dr. Akua told me the original Egyptians were black people. What's going on here? And you don't typically begin to see the indigenous people until you go further south in Luxor and a little further south than that. Then you begin to see the Nubians, right? And it becomes a little more clear. Well, just like in America, if you get off the plane coming to America for the first time, you're not likely to see Native Americans either, right? So one of the challenges that we have to do is we have to raise up a generation of scholars who will be prepared to take on the work of restoring our artifacts. So if all of the ancient Egyptian artifacts were turned over to black people today, are we prepared with enough scholars to be able to handle those artifacts? If all of the artifacts of West Africa were turned over to our people today, would we be prepared? Now, some nations are prepared, and some have petitioned to European nations to return their artifacts. But by and large, we have to create a generation of young scholars who understand Medu Neter language, who understand our history, who understand our culture, and many of our other languages to do the interdisciplinary work that we're talking about. So you might be one of those people. Ashe? Thank you for that question. All right. You said we have what? Okay, so we have time for one last question right over here, okay?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is John Tay Turner, and I love my African history. I study a lot on my own. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, so I was kind of familiar with everything you were speaking about. I have like 2 questions. My first question is about DeSantis in Florida. how we have a lawsuit going on because they want to hide African American history from our youth. And my second question is about reparations. Right now, San Francisco is trying to come up with a sum of money that they think that will fulfill everything that they've done to the African American community. And to me, my opinion is that money is not enough, that, we need our own communities first before they start giving us any type of money so that we can, preserve the history that we have in Los Angeles, and other, places where there's a heavy population of African American people.
So I'll start with your last question first. On the topic of reparations, one of the scholars from this area, Dr. Rosie Milligan, I believe she owned a bookstore in this area years ago, but she said if they were wise, they would give us reparations today and cut the check, because in our current state of mind, they'd have the money right back in a matter of days. So that lets you know right there, no, money is not going to be enough for reparations. There need to be appropriations for land. There needs to be appropriations for us to start businesses. There must be appropriations for education. There is no Black person in America who should ever have to pay for any type of education, pre-K through postdoctorate. Ashe, the ancestors paid the price, as far as I'm concerned. And so we're actually working on a piece dealing with reparations right now that we hope to release by this time next year, so that presidential candidates in the 2024 election will have to speak definitively to the issue of reparations. Okay, that's going to be a monumental task, but we're up for it and we're going to make it happen. So the first question that you asked about DeSantis in Florida and the blocking of the African American History AP course. First of all, most of our children, most of our students don't make it to AP classes. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is he had no jurisdiction to make the decision that he made. The subject of my doctoral dissertation, my doctorate is in educational policy studies, and my dissertation was an examination of Florida Statute 1003.3H, and that is the African American history legislation. A lot of people, even in Florida, don't know that they have one of the most comprehensive African American history laws. And it's comprehensive as I studied a number of other states, New York, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Illinois. But Florida's African American history legislation says that all teachers K through 12 must teach the African and African American contribution to whatever subject that they teach. Most people in Florida don't even know that that law exists, and it was passed in 1994. But here's the thing. As Dr. Amos Wilson says, laws are only as good as those who uphold them. So teachers are not being held accountable for being complicit with that law. And so as a result, what happens is oftentimes it's not on their evaluation, and teachers don't teach what's not on their evaluation. Ashe? So it's very important to understand that that law is already on the books in Florida in particular. In a number of other states, like I mentioned before, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, South Carolina, they have what's called Amistad law. And that is where you have to teach about our enslavement in the social studies class. Well, our history didn't begin in slavery. So while I think there were some very well-meaning people who had that past, that was good, but it's not enough. Our story didn't begin in slavery, and it shouldn't just be relegated to the social studies classroom. You must teach the African and African American contribution to every discipline. And most teachers and most professors, we have not been educated on those things. That's why Malefi Asante says we got to take 2 sets of notes. Ashe? So I hope that gives some insights into your question. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for coming out today and for your support. We do have some books out front. And I do want to say that when you get the book, on the inside cover, there's a QR code. And when you scan that QR code, it takes you to 15 brief video clips that covers key concepts from the book. So I want to thank you in advance for your support for that. Thank you so much.
Before we do our closing remarks, I want to really give a shout out to if you guys just got 2 minutes before you begin to leave, I want to give a shout out to our district Umoja coordinators. I see a few, Dr. Kalinda McLean, Nicole Flores. Who am I missing? I know Professor Tucker was here. Who am I missing? But I think we have a few online. I want to give a shout out to Brittany Gray, Elliot Coney. You guys help me out. Who am I forgetting? Blaine at LACD College, Dr. Blaine Simpson. And am I missing anyone else? No, but they're Professor Tucker. They make it happen. If it wasn't for them, they make it happen. And when we talk about labor of love, that's labor of love. That's labor of love. They really want to see African American student success. So let's give a shout out to them. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to point out a few more people. Professor McCleaver, right here. Who else? I seen somebody else. I'm sorry. Sorry. And I see a few more, but I just want to just give a shout out for people that this work behind the scenes is difficult. It's extremely difficult. And when you see, like I said, it takes a village. When you see people that support you, in our culture, oftentimes church lasts forever because, when the main pastor gets up there, we gotta thank everyone. So I apologize if I'm forgetting anyone, but just shout out to my supporters and our supporters that support our African American student success. And then in our closing remarks, I want to bring out Dean McGee. How are you, Dr. Dean McGee?
All right. I know we are out of time. And so I just want to, if we could just give Dr. Berry one more hand. Because as she says, things like this just don't happen. It takes a lot to bring us together and keep us there. But I want to say, and the chancellor is gone, I really wanted to just thank him and those who were responsible for allowing administrators, staff, faculty, et cetera, for those of us from our district who were allowed to travel to Ghana. We had an amazing, and as Dr. Berry mentioned earlier, transformational experience. In Toastmasters, they told us, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. All right. So I wrote a poem. It's, if you'll just help me, it takes 2.5 minutes. I timed myself. And about our experience. And it has some of the things that you heard today all throughout. It was September 2022. And over 300 California educators were prepared for a trip to Ghana far away after the chancellors, the presidents, and the VP approvals were yes and okay. Passport obtained, shots taken, flights made, visas ordered, sunscreens purchased, and meetings on the run. Indeed, the excitement built with so much preparation and recommendations yet to be done. As my heart smiled, my thoughts on arrival on the continent of Africa was quite different this time, as I knew from having been once before to expect an experience that felt like going home, one that was one of a kind. I look forward to the connection with the people, the culture, and the land of my ancestors, a place where I could proudly stand. As we traveled in buses from the airport to our hotels to prepare for the summit at the University of Cape Coast, we were escorted by motorcycle police, had views of the motherland, the people, the goats, and oh yes, it was the most. The education summit that we attended did not disappoint. Yes, we were all there, greeted in grand fashion from our African people, our Ataman brothers, and entertainment all prepared. Now the leaders and presenters were second to none, and listening to their every word regarding the educational excellence and cultural awareness was a must. But the words came from kings and chiefs and queen mothers and rabbis and presidents and authors and professors. Yes, yes, they all poured into us. The truth of our land and culture with possibilities was shared by all, a true diaspora filled with our movement excuse me, filled with our movement, our history, filled with both sorrow and that which we could ultimately appreciate and stand tall. In spite of what we saw during our visit to slave dungeons where our ancestors were treated less than human, to say the least, in spite of colonization, apartheid, police brutality, gerrymandering, discriminatory hiring practices, economic envy, and predatory capitalism, and the list can go on, for we cannot be at peace. For we are reminded that we are walking in the footsteps of giants, and we have so much more to give. But as Professor Akua noted, we sometimes experience cultural identity in the land that we live. I won't name them today, but you know them. There have been massive contributions that have been made by oh so many, and including the areas of politics and music and sports and education and the art. Yes, it's a plenty. There's more work for us to do. Now with this African-centered mind thought is a must, especially what we learned today. As we're encouraged to change our mentality and free our minds from inferiority that has affected us. Although important, just knowing our history is not enough and won't take us where we deserve to be. Centering ourselves in the students we serve with our rich and powerful history is no doubt a part of the key. We are taught that African values, cultures, and traditions are second to none, my friends. We as a people, our students and our children have a right to learn in an environment where the Black narrative is sovereign. Yes, we ended our summit with excellence as a mantra, while redefining our value systems and knowing that it was a must. It's time to build more and connect more and deliver more and be more, no matter the fuss. And as Dr. Akua told us today, we are reminded once again of Marcus Garvey's word: without knowledge of our past history, culture, and origin, we are like a tree without roots. So we must continue to move forward, empowered in our history of keeping on, moving on, and marching on in our boots. Thank you. And I'm going to share this presentation to Dr. Akua with Dr. Davis, my counterpart.
Well, LA Southwest College has been enriched today, and administrators, faculty, staff, students, community members, please help us in showing our gratitude to Dr. Akua by presenting this swag bag from LA Southwest College so he can represent when he's touring around the world. Thank you so much. And the AAOI from the district, the college, you guys have turned this out today. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day at Southwest College. Just have some welcome week activities going on outside. Take a look at it. Sign up for some classes. All right, guys. Thank you.